What's up? This is Brother Sarah. Welcome. A few days ago, I posted on Facebook that understand that truth does not operate in polarities. Realize that truth exists and is found in synthesis. I posted that to compel people to think, to promote introspection. So I didn't respond to questions about that particular post because I wanted to encourage contemplation, because in spirituality, it's best to allow someone to go within to find the answer, rather than to have the answer come from an external source. And so that's part of what I teach, and what spiritual teachers throughout millennia have taught, is to go within to find the answer. And so that's why, instead of answering it myself, I wanted people to go within to try to find the answer. So, having given some time for that to sink in and to allow people to find the answer, I decided to go ahead and provide the answer. And so that's what I'm doing now. So again, so the post read that understand that truth does not exist or operate in polarities. Realize that truth exists and is found in synthesis. So what do I mean by that? Often when we're on a search for truth, more often than not, what people will do is they'll come up with a thesis, if you will. And the thesis will be typically on a polarity. What I mean by that is it will typically be either one of two ideas, right? So in the polarity comes the conclusion that if this idea is correct, then by virtue it must validate the opposing conclusion or the opposite conclusion, because the two ideas are on different ends of the spectrum, if you will. And so the concept is it's either this or it's that. It's either black or it's white. So the point that I was making in saying that the truth doesn't exist in polarity, that the truth resides in synthesis, ultimately means that the truth is typically not found in either perspective, and further, one does not invalidate the other. So typically where the truth is found is in between. The truth is found in synthesis. And so what we find is that it's not this or that is both. Synthesis. Indeed, when we are taught philosophy and research, we're taught the concept of thesis antithesis, and synthesis. Okay, and so we live right now in a polarized world where we don't think in terms of synthesis. We think that it's either this or it's this. Never the twain shall meet. And so we miss the truth by looking at things from that perspective. And so let me give an example of where we find that synthesis is the truth. Some time ago, I began my research into the life of Jesus the Christ. This is a controversial topic, but I don't care. If one is compelled to do the research, honestly, without being wed to a conclusion, which often people are, then you'll come to the same conclusion. And allowing the Spirit to lead you to the truth. So, in my quest to understand the life of Jesus the Christ, I was actually thinking in terms of polarity at the beginning of my own research. So it was about determining whether the life of Jesus was historical fact or if it was based upon or is a created myth. After years and years of research, I found that the story of Jesus was based upon the solar mythos. What's the solar mythos? The solar mythos is the fact that from our vantage point, when we look into the heavens, it gives us the perspective that the sun is moving around the earth and will be seen in different positions throughout the year. When we give observation to it, we see that the sun begins its path on the ecliptic on the date of December 25th, the date that is celebrated as the birth of the Son of God, S-O-N. Well, we're talking about the S-U-N Son here. So the sun begins its path on the ecliptic. Symbolically, the sun, S-U-N, is born on December 25th. And then it begins its path on the ecliptic, passing over the equator. We'll come back to that. In the spring, reaches the summer solstice, and then begins its descent on the ecliptic, passing the astrological or the equator as it extends out into the universe. And when it's on even with the equator, the sun is said to be on the cross. It's crossing the equator. The sun symbolically is being crucified on the cross. Then it descends into the underworld. From the days of December 23rd to December 25th, the sun appears to be in the underworld stationary for 3 days and 3 nights. And then on December 25th, the sun begins its upward path on the ecliptic again. Symbolically, the sun is being reborn on December 25th. And then when it comes into the spring equinox, and equinox means that it's equal for the from the North Pole into the South, equal distance. When the sun passes into the spring equinox, then the sun is passing over the equator, Passover. Okay, and so when the sun passes over, the sun is resurrected. Okay, and so that is the source of the birth date of the sun. This date has been ascribed to the various sun gods throughout the antiquity, and for acceptance purposes, when the story of Jesus was being canonized, the date was ascribed to Jesus as December 25th to make it more palatable to accept the new dispensation of religion that was being brought. Okay, now, so that is part of the official story of being ascribed that date. Okay, and so one school of thought is that because the date of Jesus' birth and the story of the birth, life, death, and resurrection is based upon the solar mythos, then the conclusion is that, well, therefore, this proves that Jesus was not a historical figure. On the other hand, the other side of the polarity is that Jesus was a historical figure. The solar mythos is irrelevant, and that the Bible is the proof of Jesus' life, historical life. That's not true either. There are other sources outside the Bible which I've studied and found to be evidence of the historical life of Jesus the Christ, who was an Essene spiritual master, who, as all spiritual masters, had a master-disciple relationship. So the answer to the question as to the historicity, if you will, of the Jesus the Christ is not in either one of those to the exclusion of the other. It is a synthesis of the two. So the story of Jesus is both an amalgamation of the solar mythos and a historical existence. That's one example. There are a number of examples and things that I've researched, had discussions about with people, in even my counseling. It's never an issue of polarity. The answer is usually found in the synthesis. It's usually not a black and white issue. It's gray. It's not either or, it's both. So that's what I mean by the answer is found in synthesis. And so when we allow ourselves to be able to go within, to engage in deep contemplation, which is what I was encouraging by not answering the question outright when it was first posed to me, was to encourage us to go within to be able to find the answer. And as I pointed out, the answer is found not in polarity, but it's found in synthesis. I hope that you found this to be thought-provoking, and I hope that it will encourage you to contemplate it and consider it when you are engaged in your own contemplations and in your own research to try to find the truth. Hotel.